get started. So thank you everyone once again for coming out. My name is Mayrose. I've been working with Francis Queller and Queller Prep the company since 2016 when I was a senior in high school. And currently I'm a first year medical student at Weill Cornell Medicine. So it's been definitely a journey since Francis and I have been working together. I started off grading essays and then transitioned to tutoring for SAT, ACT, standardized subjects, grades, elementary school through middle school, state exams, regents, AP tests, really everything under the roof that Queller has to offer. So it's been quite some time, and today what we're really hoping to do is bring together a series of webinars that we can really use to help inform everyone about the college process, tips and tricks, or anything else that really will benefit students not only in the college process, but also like once they progress into their academic careers or into their professional life. And so the topic of today is about college interview questions and professional etiquette when communicating. And I think this is really something that is under or is overlooked by a lot of students who don't necessarily understand um just the value of like sending a good email or just the value of communicating well. And I think developing this skill in high school is really, really pivotal to maximizing the opportunities that you're presented with in college. And so I think this is a great time for students to be very cognizant of the way that they're communicating, but whether verbally or through text that's written, and really work on improving these skills because they will go a long way. I was really lucky that I was able to get this experience through my high school. So I went to Townsend Harris High School, and as a high school that really is focused on the humanities, there was a really significant emphasis on writing, which I think really made me confident in my writing abilities and in my ability to communicate. And I think I also was involved in the newspaper at Townsend Harris. And not only was I able to, get professional accolade or, receive like national awards or just be heavily involved in the publication process at the school. I think I really was trained on how to send emails or trained on how to communicate in a succinct but also very intentional and professional way. So I'm hoping to get across some of those skills to everyone in the audience here today so that they can take those same skills with them moving forward. So I prepared a short presentation for today, really just to make sure that all the points are visible and all the points are sort of addressed. But if there are any questions during the meeting, please feel free to use the chat feature. It's actually a small group today, so I'm more than happy to answer individual questions and really use this time to benefit everyone. So I first wanted to talk about the interview, which is one of the modes of communication that an individual can have with their college. And I think the interview is something that is really almost a hidden gem for a lot of schools in the sense that mostly institutions have interviews as completely optional. Very, very few schools. In my research, I only found one school that requires them, but very few schools require interviews. Most, if not all of them, aside from the exception mentioned here, which is Georgetown University, say the interviews are optional or recommended. I think my take on this entire process is anything that is optional is something that you should do. I say that for a few reasons, but I want to make sure that there are a few caveats or nuances that are addressed here. I think in my experience, myself applying to colleges or in my experience, even now applying to medical school, anything optional is an opportunity for you to make yourself stand out. And so that opportunity should be leveraged, um, should absolutely be leveraged. At the same time, there are certain opportunities that are not meant for students to stand out, but rather for individual students to share their experiences or share any particular hardships or circumstances that they've gone through. In that case, I would recommend, if this applies to you and there's a significant hardship or um, circumstance that you feel like has significantly impacted your application, that's definitely something you want to talk about, but you don't want to force it. So what I mean by that is the interview is an excellent opportunity that um for something that is optional but will allow you to stand out or just will allow you to communicate and interact with the college community so you can also get a sense of how that community is for you. On the other hand, most recently, for example, I know a lot of schools, for example, when I was applying to medical school, a lot of schools asked how COVID-19 affected me, or a lot of schools asked about, certain extenuating circumstances that I had throughout my academic performance. Those are places where, although that optional was provided for me to speak to the question at hand, those were places I did not use for writing any aspect of my application. The reason for that was because it was not appropriate and it was not applicable. I did not have any significant, circumstances during college that impacted my academics, to the point where there was a concern or there was something that I needed to address in the application. So I did not use it. It gives a very bad taste or it looks very inappropriate if you use a space meant for someone to talk about extenuating real life significant hardships. And if you use that for something that is relatively minor, it goes to show that you're not having an understanding of what is being communicated to you. So what I want to emphasize is anything optional is something that you should do, but you have to make sure it's appropriate and applicable. I was very, I was very thankful that during the COVID-19, my immediate family, everyone stayed healthy, everyone stayed well. So in the COVID-19 application essay, I did not talk about COVID-19 in the context of like health or in the context of the pandemic, but I talked about COVID-19 in the context of my opportunities and what experiences I had that were delayed or what experiences I had that were canceled and how that made me grow into finding other new experiences to develop my application. So again, all this goes to show it to the point that you want to do everything that is optional, but you want to make sure you're doing it in an appropriate way. And the interview is one of the best ways to do that because it is an optional step that allows you to have face-to-face contact, that allows people to put a face to the name or to put a face to the application, and in that way allows you to stand out. And I want to reiterate that there are many forms to this interview, given that there's not a strict format that is followed by institutions across the country. Again, in doing my research, Brown University seems to have what's called a video introduction. So they won't interview traditionally, but they want you to record a video of yourself and submit it in your application. Again, this is something that more or less does the job of the interview. They want to put a face to the name. Something to really think about here is how do you want to present yourself? How do you want your surroundings to be? Do you want your surroundings to, be representative of you in a school setting, of a professional work setting where you may be working, in your home setting? Do you want to introduce yourself in a casual way, in a very professional way? These are all things that are going to be very important to consider in your interview because, again, the interview and every other aspect of the application comes together to make a theme. You want to come together and have a cohesive application come together where each and every aspect of the application supports a theme about you or allows the reader or the admissions officer to walk away with your application with a take-home message about who you are and something memorable. So everything should mesh together and every single aspect of the application should give new and updated information about you, but all that information should come together in harmony and just really mesh with one another. So the interview is a great way to do that. And like I mentioned, typically because the interview is optional, it's going to be available by invitation only, typically from alumni. And again, this process does vary from college to college. So the best way would be to check the school that you're applying to directly. I know that for myself, at the time that I was applying, Barnard had an interview that was optional that I could schedule on my own. So I did take advantage of that and I scheduled the interview on my own. And it was definitely an awesome opportunity for me to visit the campus, interact with an alumni who, made an impression on me about the school, just get a sense of how to navigate the school. All these little things are really helpful in allowing you to get an assessment of how the school is. And I think for the rest of today, really my goal is to go over a few questions and encourage you all to think about them a little differently than you may have been previously. all of these questions are common questions during not only the college interview, but really any interview. These are questions that, have been asked for me, have been asked from me in job applications, or even again at the med school process. So I think it's really important to think critically about these questions and understand how you can craft your responses to be not only as impressive, but also as authentic. And I'm gonna go through do's and don'ts for each of the questions, so that again, you all have an idea of strategies to address them. And I'd also love like any questions that you all may have or any feedback. So the first question is tell me about yourself. And there are a couple of pitfalls in this question style. The first is that I notice this is a question where it's very easy for individuals to start rambling. This is such a broad question that it becomes very, very easy for students or really anyone to pick up any aspect of their life and elaborate on every single aspect of it. So, for example, like students will go in way too much detail about their academic history. Then, once they do that, they'll go into detail about their extracurriculars and the things that they've done. And at a point you start listing your resume or you start rehashing your application. That is not a good way to start the conversation because ultimately you realize the more you're talking that you are talking so much and it just provides a chaotic feeling to the interview. So it's really important to keep the response tight and focused. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by that. I also want to really strongly emphasize students and anyone who's here is to use this question, tell me about yourself, to tell the person about yourself, not to talk about your future career path or to start talking about why you want to go to this school. I've seen a lot of students fall into the trap where they'll start talking about themselves and then they'll slowly transition into this is why I want to be a doctor, or this is why I want to go into this profession. That's very easy to do because as you're describing qualities about yourself, it naturally aligns with what you may want to do or what you may be interested in. But again, that's not the question. The question is, tell me about yourself, and you as an individual should stand separate from the school. What you do want to do is tell me about yourself is practice this question endlessly because it's going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. If you have a good tell me about yourself question, automatically sometimes the reader or the listener picks up certain things of interest that they then ask you further questions about and it becomes more of a conversation. On the other hand, if you're rambling and you realize that the listener is just looking at you blankly as you talk on and on and on, it definitely can make you very self-conscious about yourself and it can just lead to you answering other questions that were never asked. I like to think about this as an introduction of myself in all the different aspects of life that I come from. So I typically introduce myself by saying, hello, like my name is Mayrose. Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview me and for spending time with me today. And then I talk a little bit about academics, a little bit about geography, a little bit about where I come from, my family, and throw in a fun fact like pets. So typically I would say something like, again, assuming that this is for a college interview, or most recently what I did was a medical school interview, but again, the thought process is the same. So I would say, again, my academic background, what I'm doing, etc. An example, I would say, thank you so much for interviewing me. Most recently, I graduated from Barnard in 2021. I attended Barnard and majored in biochemistry. And in that time, I recognized that I developed a passion for the science while also an appreciation for the liberal arts because Barnard is a liberal arts institution. My attendance at Barnard was in light of the fact that I'm a born and raised New Yorker and I've lived my entire life in Queens and was excited to explore a different aspect of the city while still being close to home. My family is also from Queens. We've lived there our entire life. My parents immigrated to the United States and I was born here and I have two sisters and two cats. So this is, again, the emphasis here, and this was obviously an abbreviated version of what I might say at an actual interview, but the emphasis here is that I'm not deep diving into any one of these categories too much. I'm giving the interviewer an overlay of who I am in different aspects of my life. Whatever it is that interests them, they can ask me more questions about. This is the first question, not the last. So it's very important for students to remember to keep their response tight and focused because that ultimately really determines how you feel about the rest of the interview. Another really common question is why this school? And I think this is a question that is not as hard as tell me about yourself because it's a lot more focused. But I think, again, it poses a lot of common traps that I see students fall into. I see students listing every single aspect about the school. That is counterintuitive and that is going to do more harm than good. And I'm going to explain why. Again, this is a small group, so I can give like a short example and I hope everyone understands it, or if not, feel free to ask me a question. If I give you a grocery list and I ask you to buy 15 things and I verbally list those 15 things, chances are you're going to forget, if not at least one thing, a majority of them. Now, if I say, I want you to go to the grocery store and buy 2 or 3 things, you're going to remember those 2 or 3 things a lot more. That's just human nature. We remember things, we remember things when they're less in quantity. We remember things when we have attributed meaning to them or when we've attributed some sort of significance to them. So rather than listing every single aspect of the school from A to Z, like location, research, prestige, alumni group, scholarships, curriculum, pre-med activities, liberal arts activities, clubs, so on and so forth, rather than listing every single thing, it's better to create a theme. And in creating a theme, you create a theme on behalf of your application and you figure out what best matches that. So for example, um, if something is relevant to you, your desire to attend the institution, find one bucket where other things can fall under. What I mean by that is, again, I'm going to use an example, my most recent example of medical school, which will apply to the college process. I recognize that I wanted to come to Cornell for a variety of reasons. I wanted to come to Cornell because of the research opportunities and their collaboration with other institutions that are known for their research. I wanted to come to Cornell because of its proximity to New York City, because of its location in New York City and its proximity to my support system or my family. Um, I wanted to come to Cornell, again, to continue living in New York City, because I really do like living here, etc. All of those things, whether it was the research, whether it was the location of the school, it's the school's proximity to my support system, even the school's global health programs, which I was really interested in. All of that I bucketed under the theme of location. So I started off my statement by saying, um, although I'm interested in Cornell for so many reasons, its location is really what drives me to attending it. For example, Cornell's location, nestled within other institutions like Rockefeller University, Memorial Sloan Kettering, and the Hospital for Special Surgery, along with New York Presbyterian, provides the ideal learning environment for me. I'm really interested and excited to be surrounded by other physicians, by other researchers, by other individuals who are growing and developing in medicine, just like I will be. And I'm really excited to network and socialize with these individuals, to find my mentors, to find opportunities that I can craft for myself. That I fit under location. So even though I'm talking about, my main point is Cornell's institutional relationships with other schools or universities, I'm still able to bucket that under the theme of location. Similarly, the point of the global health program, I phrased it in a way that was under the bucket of location. So for example, I said, Cornell's stellar location is not only limited to New York City, but its location also spans the globe. I'm aware that Cornell has a variety of global health programs in different diverse areas of the world, and I'm really excited to broaden my experience from living in New York City, which is also very diverse, to now living in different areas on the planet and recognizing how medicine is practiced in other countries so that I can, again, grow and develop from seeing other medical institutions. So again, topic was global health experiences, but theme that I created or the bucket that I made was still under location. So this allows you to get across your few most important points without sacrificing any of them because you are attributing meaning to them and you're grouping them by a certain theme. And Obviously, you want to do research for whatever school you're attending. You want to make sure you have your facts straight. You want to make sure you're not confusing with any other school. You want to make sure you're as specific as possible. Okay. Strength and weaknesses. This is again a very common question that's often asked in job interviews, high school interviews, college interviews. Um, It's very important that you don't state a fake weakness. A lot of students are hesitant on stating something that is an actual weakness, or a lot of students are hesitant on sharing something that might be seen as negative about them. However, you want to again be sure that you're finding a balance between being authentic and hurting your application. So, for example, a weakness could be something like for example, a true weakness of yours might be the inability to submit something on time. That is something that, although is a weakness, I wouldn't necessarily recommend saying in a formal interview, especially one that has stakes attached. Again, like a college interview or a graduate school interview or a med school or a job interview. I recommend saying something that is not necessarily related to the task at hand. Um, but is still a weakness. So for example, something that I use a lot is I say that I really have difficulty saying no to projects, to tasks, to action items, and that really becomes difficult and sometimes overwhelming for me because I have this tendency to take upon a lot on myself, and although I'm able to accomplish things, it is a lot for me to do on my own independently, and it takes a lot of effort, mentally for me to complete all my tasks that I volunteer to. That is a weakness because I'm saying that this is something that is not appropriate. I'm saying that I need to draw boundaries for myself. But it's not something that would, raise a red flag in someone's eyes or make someone alarmed or concerned. Now, a fake weakness is something that is not even a weakness, but it's a strength, and you're pretending it's a weakness. So I've often heard people say, I'm such a perfectionist. That's my weakness because I spend, 20 days or I spend 20 hours painstakingly on an assignment. That comes across as very superficial and artificial, because ultimately being a perfectionist is not seen as a weakness in today's society. So you really want to find that balance again between being authentic, and answering the question without hurting your application. I think it's also really important to not just list your strengths and weaknesses, but come up with short supporting examples, um, to prove to the listener that this is indeed your strength and this is indeed your weakness. It's important that you do this, obviously, when asked. Some interviewers will just ask you, "Can you tell me three of your strengths and three of your weaknesses?" Some of them will say, like, "Can you tell me a story that will demonstrate your strength?" Or "Can you tell me about a time that you recognized your strengths?" And so it's important to obviously pay attention to the circumstances, but be prepared with these short scenarios. So, for example, um, if someone were to ask my weakness, which I mentioned is the inability to say no and taking upon way too much work for myself, I have a story to corroborate that. If someone if someone has a question asking me about my strengths, I want to make sure I have a story to corroborate that as well. Another question is, what are you interested in or what do you study? And oftentimes, again, I see students falling into pitfalls with this question because they've planned everything out for themselves. So I know at the high school stage, you're applying to college, it's very, very tempting to lay out your life plan. I'm going to college, I'm going to graduate when I'm 21. When I'm 21, I'm going to do XYZ. And once I do that, I'm going to start working and then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's of course great to plan, but when you start talking in this manner at a college interview, you sound you sound like you don't have an open mind. College, and really what's being emphasized more and more, is that college is a time for people to explore their interests. College is a time for people to make friends. College is a time for people to network. College is a time for people to try out something new. And if you provide a by the books outline plan, that can make you sound just naive and immature because it's important to recognize while you may have certain interests that you're passionate about that you want to go after, it's important to recognize that college is an opportunity for you to explore a lot, so much more than that. So when someone asks you at an interview, what are you interested in or what do you study? Please do not provide like a, by the books career trajectory. I also don't want students to be dishonest. So if you write on your application that you're interested in the liberal arts per se, and in the conversation you say I want to become a neurosurgeon, like that's what I have this example here. Again, it's difficult for the reader to believe you because what you're saying on paper isn't necessarily matching what you're saying verbally. So it's very important to be honest both on the paper application that you submit and in your word choice when you are interviewing, because like I mentioned earlier, like I emphasized so much, everything needs to come together and match. You want the reader to walk away saying, I know this student. This student is interested in this. They want to do this. It's very important to have that confidence when you submit your application that the reader will be able to do that, because that means your application not only is impressive, but is just strategically organized. Like I mentioned, everything should mesh together. And so it's very important to make claims that match with your application. I also think for this question, or really for as many questions as possible, it's important to try to tie your interest into how the school can support you and how you're an asset to the school. So an interview or any college admissions process has a few goals. One is to demonstrate your eligibility or your it's to indicate your eligibility um to the school. So yes, I'm qualified. These are my qualifications. I'm qualified to go to your school. That's point one. Point two is demonstrate how you will take advantage of the school's resources. And point three, which I feel like is something that students don't recognize, point three is that you need to prove to the school that you will want me as well. You need to prove to the school that you're a student who they will be proud of, who they will know took advantage of them during your 4 years. So all aspects of the college application process, whether the personal statement or the supplemental essays or this interview, you want to do these three things. Prove your qualifications, prove that you will leverage the school's existing opportunities, and prove that the school will benefit from having you there. And so for any questions that you get, it's important to come up with an answer to all those three things to answer the question. And again, questions that you have for the interviewer, this is something that it's always, always very smart to prepare for in advance. You want to ask the interviewer questions without a doubt. You want to have questions prepared to ask them. And you want to ask questions that, again, will add to your personability and to how memorable you are. And the best way to do that is to ask questions about the interviewer as a person. Ask them what their experiences are. Ask them their relationship to school. So good questions can be, as an alumni, how have you seen your school, how have you seen X university or X college change throughout the years? As an alumni, how has your interaction been with fellow other alumni or your colleagues or your administrators? Are you still in touch with them? As an alumni, what do you recommend to students interested in this school? As an alumni, what was your favorite part of this school? So again, these are questions about their experiences. You don't want to ask them, oh, if I have this grade and this grade, how much of a chance do I have getting in? And I know it might sound silly when you hear it, but I've seen students do this. You don't want to ask them a question that can easily be answered from the website. You want to, again, this is a personality test. This is not a who passes the SAT or ACT test. This is the test about your personality, how approachable, how welcoming you are. And it's important to think how you translate to the person in front of you when you're asking questions. And lastly, just a few general points that I want to make sure are always important to keep in mind when communicating with colleges, when communicating with anyone in general. You want to communicate using professional email addresses, professional signature lines, and professional greetings or closings. So you always want to address your emails by saying, "Dear so-and-so." Typically, I always have a sentence saying, "I hope this email finds you well." Then I have the actual content of my email, and then my closing is "Best Mayrose." I've seen students use unprofessional email addresses. Their email addresses are about their pets or their email addresses are inappropriate. You want to have a very standard email, first name, last name, some combination of date of birth, some combination of numbers. But again, professional email. And feel free, if you don't have one, feel free to make another account. I have multiple accounts. I have a school alum account. I have my personal email account. I have sort of a spam, promotional, shopping account. And each account I really use for its specific purpose and only its specific purpose. You always want to use PDF when you're sending files. So I've seen a lot of students, they want to send their resume or they want to send a document to another person. Sometimes the document format's funny or sometimes the document doesn't even open. To avoid all of that, and again, to make sure you're seeming professional, you want to use PDF to send files so that you are sure the file is opening on the other end. You also want to make sure you're naming your files in a professional format. You shouldn't write like last resume, last resume, I'm done in the file name. I typically always email my resume. It has last name, comma, first name, resume, or last name, comma, first name, resume 2024. I've seen students, submit homeworks that say like, I give up, or I've seen students submit homework saying, draft 23. Again, professionalism, it really matters every single little thing. You want to make their job easier, choose you. And a way that you can do that is making sure that your emails are neat and concise, your attachments are opening, everything again is just falling into place. And again, if you reach out to an institution or really anyone, you want to make sure you first consulted the online resources provided before reaching out with a question that may already be answered online. So before you reach out to any school, please consult the website, determine if there are any questions that you have that may be answered online. And sometimes the website will even guide you on how to reach out to your admissions committee. So I remember for Barnard, they said that if I want to share something with the college, I can share to my admissions counselor who basically who evaluates students from my geographic region. So there was a specific admissions counselor who I was supposed to message to get these materials considered. And I made sure I did that. I did not randomly email the school. I did not email a random person. I followed the direction. So again, that also goes under professionalism. You want to know how to approach people to get what you want out of it. Um, so this was the extent of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions or I'm happy to go through any points if they were not clear. So please feel free to ask me using either the chat or you can unmute yourself. I'll give it a minute or two, but if there aren't any questions, then obviously you can feel free to leave the meeting and enjoy the rest of your evening. But I did want to be present for any questions. I'm more than happy to answer, whether related to this or another topic. Any other questions? Thank you, Priya. I appreciate it. Someone asked about the professional email. It's absolutely fine to use the one the school provided. Just one small thing that I will note is that a lot of times schools remove access to professional emails. So if you want something that you feel like you might need for the rest of your life, you might want to consider developing, your own professional personal email. In my experience, for applying to colleges, I used my high school email that was given to me through my school. But I think definitely for medical schools, I realized the significance of having my own personal email that was not flooded with other things. So long story short, to answer your question, for the professional email, you want to make sure that it's one that you check. it's one that's not clogged or spammed by a bunch of other things that may distract you or that may prevent you from seeing something important. And obviously that the professional email itself sounds professional. I think in most cases, the one the school gave fits the bill, but this is just something that I wanted to warn you about is that sometimes schools will revoke access, and so you're going to lose the materials that you have. In most cases, no biggie, because eventually, for example, for college, you're going to admit yourself, you can give other forms of contact, but in the case that you are very particular about a specific document, or you want a record of a specific email, you might not want to use a school one. Any other questions? So Beatrice, as a follow-up to your question, colleges will also give you a professional email account. So again, like I mentioned, it's a combination of both your preference and it's a combination of what the materials that you have. So again, in high school, I was given access to a account through Townsend Harris. And it was professional. It was my first initial last name at townsendharris.org. So again, professional. In college, my email was MA and then a few numbers at barnard.edu. So again, professional. Um, I primarily used my school emails, but like I mentioned, this is just something for you to consider is whether you want certain things to happen on your school email or not. So for example, for me, at a point, because I use my school email so often, I started using my school email for personal things too. And that was fun because I'm someone who very actively, constantly checks my email. But again, depending on the type of student or depending on the type of person you are, you may want to separate things for yourself. And that's a decision that I think is more so up to you. It's just something to think about. So I hope I answered your question. Um, I think it's more than fine and it's probably beneficial to use a school email. But there may be certain cases where you may want to create your own account for your personal use. There may be a case where you want to create a separate account just for professional use, etc. Any other questions? Okay, well, if not, it was a pleasure to have everyone here today. I hope that I answered some questions, provided some insight on the process, and definitely stay tuned. We're going to be having more webinars in the coming weeks. They all are going to be on Thursday evenings, and I'll be leading all the remaining ones. So I'm excited to talk to everyone further about other aspects of the application process. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye bye. Thank you.